Good afternoon, everyone. I see so many people already on. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn off my video and mute myself for just the next 5 minutes while everybody else gets on. But thank you so much for everybody, excuse me, for your timeliness. I'm so excited for this webinar this afternoon, and I will get started at 2 p.m. on the dot. I do see that some folks have put their name and the either community network or Ready Start network that you are with. That is totally okay. You do not have to do that because I can see you in the chat. But if you do have a name that is not clear, like it's your initials or it's a phone number, please go ahead and change your name so that I can call on you. I will even do the same and change my name from early childhood to Devin. So that we are all able to communicate clearly with each other. Thank you so much.
It's like a click it.
Alrighty, everyone, it is exactly 2 p.m. on the nose. So I'm going to get started because we do have a lot of content to cover this afternoon, and I do have us booked for 2 hours. I'm going to try to roll through as much of this as I can without stopping so that anybody who has other obligations this afternoon can hop off when we finish, but also to save the end of this session for any questions that may have come up. I already mentioned, for those of you who were early, if you could change your name to your actual name in the by clicking participants and clicking your name, click more, and then rename. That way you can I see, Bridget, you have your hand up. What can I do for you, Bridget?
I'm sorry, I was just clicking participants and I
Oh,
messed
that's
this
okay.
one.
But I was like, oh man, she's ready to go today. So if you can just rename yourself to either your name or the person's name who is on, maybe it, I might have been Lizzie and on the Zoom, but I switched it to Devin so that y'all know who I am, so I can address you specifically. But I am so excited to speak with you today. We are going to, I'm calling this the Kickoff webinar. So we're going to kind of talk broadly about all things birth to 3 seats. Just so you know, there are people on this call who have done this for 2 years going into their 3rd year. There are some people on this call who are just for the first time starting birth to 3 seats. So some of you may be getting information that you've already heard before, and that's okay because we are trying to fine tune every piece of information that we're giving to you. So please pretend like it is your first time hearing all of this. If you do have any questions at any point throughout the webinar, please drop them in the chat box. I'm saving time at the very end for any questions that we can discuss, or there might be natural points where they are able to be discussed with slides that I have for discussion. But please stay off of or stay on mute unless specifically addressed so that we can save time here. As you saw in your allocations notification that came through your email a couple of Mondays ago, we have this session, the eligibility specific webinar on April 6th. I did update that from 2 to 4 p.m. because 1 hour, just as I was reviewing the slides, I did not think that was going to cut it. Hopefully it will be closer to 1.5 hours, but as we know, eligibility can be very tricky. So I want to make sure that we have that full time. May 6th, your planning document will be due. I'm going to be sending that out to you after this webinar and going in detail to all the questions and topics that you'll discuss or respond to in that document. Then May 25th, we have the EGMS budget prep webinar. Those are the main things that you need to have in your calendars. I've sent out invitations for those and have asked y'all if I didn't send it to either the correct person or the entire team of yours supporting birth to 3 seats, to please send me the email addresses of anyone who needs to be included so that they can be in attendance on those dates. And then June 1st is when funds will go live in EGMS, where you can complete your budget, where you can complete assurances and contact information. And then by July 15th, your budget in EGMS will be due. Today, we're going to talk about all things birth to 3 seats. We're going to talk about allocations. We're going to talk about center eligibility, briefly about family eligibility, and then the bulk of this discussion will be about your planning document. So we are going to provide to you guidance throughout the entirety of this upcoming year. This is the earliest actually for we've ever started giving you support and information about birth to 3 seats. So hopefully we're going to continue to set you all up for success in administering these seats. But a couple of things to note that we at the department are requiring you to submit a planning document by May 6th. You've heard me say that phrase a couple of times. You're going to find out what that is shortly. To establish partnership agreements with participating centers, determine eligibility at the lead agency level, and retain documentation for those eligibility requirements. Create your budget, determine payment structures to your centers that are participating, and track attendance and send to the department monthly. We also recommend that you structure payments at the beginning of the month to centers, ensure flexibility in your partnership agreements, and hire or delegate staff for the exclusive purpose of administering birth to 3 seats, because as I think many of the returning networks would attest to, this is a beast of work depending on the time of year. And it really requires a lot of expertise, a lot of dedication, and a lot of time. So before we even jump into any of the other slides, I want to put that at the forefront of your minds now, so that you can be thinking about how to do all the things we're about to talk about with a team of people, not just one of you who are typically are already wearing about 15 hats. You don't need another one. So hopefully you can put that hat on somebody else. So for overview of seat requests, this year for 22-23 in your super app requests, there were over 5,000, or there was exactly 5,789 birth to 3-year-old seat requests across all parishes in Louisiana. Of our 66 early childhood community networks in the state, 43 or 66% of those requested birth to 3 seats. And we were able to award 30 Ready Start networks who were administering seats in diverse delivery, those seats. Now, the next slide is going to talk, or on this next slide, I will address with you that unless a network requested only a handful of seats, like literally 3, 4, or 5 seats, everybody received a smaller amount of seats than you requested, because of course, y'all are giving, abundant and ambitious requests. We would love to be able to fill every single seat. Unfortunately, the funding is limited. So we did have to make some decisions about how to adjust those seat requests. So we took into consideration for current B-3 seat participants, their enrollment in January of 2021, which is when we were making decisions about allocations, and then prioritizing the youngest children in the state. So any infant requests starting were allocated at the highest level. If a network at any point in the upcoming year reaches 100% of enrollment or 100% enrolled of their allocation, you will be considered for additional allocations as funding allows. And I encourage you, and we'll talk with you over these next few weeks and months about how to do any additional requests. But at this time, we did have to make some tough decisions. And if you have any questions about the decisions that were made for your network specifically, please reach out to me. So allowable uses of funds, we will always want to be focused on using these funds for direct payments to centers for seats. In previous years, there has not been a stipulation on how much of that funding needed to be paid for seats, with the exception of that the seat needed to be tuition free to families. For this upcoming year, there is an additional requirement that at least 70% of the funds that you have been allocated must be used for payments directly to centers for seats. I'm going to say that one more time, and note that this is in direct alignment with our Early Childhood Education Fund legislative requirements for that money, which is likely going to have a bigger role in birth to 3 seats in the future. So we wanted to create alignment there. But one more time, 70% or more of your allocation must be used to pay centers directly for seats. That line was also in your allocation notification. So that should not be a surprise to you today. It is different from previous years. And I am here, and my team are here to support you in budgeting and making sure that you're able to complete that request. But other allowable uses for the other 30% of your allocation could include, obviously direct payments to centers for administering seats, in addition to that 70%, stipends or salaries for administrative staff at the lead agency level who are processing eligibility documents, stipends for teachers, and enrollment activities, translators for non-English speaking families, coaching staff, salaries supporting birth to 3 seat classrooms or teachers. And we can also discuss other allowable uses. These are the main ones that we would like you to focus on. And also just think about, we just did the the Believe applications. You have a lot of other funding sources coming through beyond that, like Ready Start Network, like lead agency, like community supply building and access expansion. So I just encourage you to think really creatively in this spring and summer about where your funds are being used, and to strategically use funds in such a way that you're maximizing those dollars and how they can be spent. And if at any point you're in a place where you're stuck, or you want to spend money on X, Y, or Z and are only seeing birth to 3 seats funds as a way to use it, just loop me in and I would be more than happy to brainstorm with you. So digging now into the overview of rates, for those of you who participated in previous years or who were aware of what our funding was for previous years, you probably noticed a significant increase in our infant rate. And just so you know the logic behind that briefly, that is in alignment with the newly adjusted Ccap rates in February of 2022. We included the rate that Ccap would pay for any Ccap recipient child at that age range, plus an estimated quarterly bonus payment for the center based on what Ccap would normally pay for a center based on their star rating, based on the rate of pay for that child. And that is how we came to these rates. The 3-year-old rate, toddler rate, and infant rate, so all three are still higher than what Ccap is currently paying. So if you are paying your centers, you will be paying your centers for these seats, you can and should pay your centers at an equal to or higher rate than Ccap, so they are continuing to be attractive and desirable seats for your centers, and we are not losing space for B-3 seats to other publicly funded programs. These should be desirable, these should be competitive, these should be seats that your centers want to administer. And because, again, the allocation for this upcoming year, because of that huge jump in infant rates, it did not make sense for us to do an average in the way that we've done in previous years. So if you are you've been allocated a number of seats by age group, of course, we know that that might not be what you're able to enroll in the fall, because maybe one mom had quadruplets and they're all infants and you only had 3 infants on your request. We of course would want you to enroll all of the infants, but just know that each age, because of that huge jump in the infant and from infant to the other seats, it is not like a 1-to-1 ratio of 1 infant seat is the same as a toddler seat. So it's going to require some math. It's going to require some moving around of dollars and cleverness with your budgeting. You're not frozen into those seats, but it will require some potentially more 3-year-olds or more toddlers enrolled than your total original allocation from this spring, if you are funding more toddlers and 3-year-olds than you originally anticipated. I see there's a question in the chat box. I'm actually going to come back to that because I'm not entirely sure. Pam, if you could reword your question, I'm a little confused about what you mean. So I'm going to keep rolling and on to the next slide. So just so you know, we did not break this down in your allocation notification, but it will be done in the post-BESI notification. That birth to 3 seats funding is split between the preschool development renewal grant and ARPA CCDBG. The majority of your funds, 78%, are funded the majority of the funds are through ARPA CCDBG, and the other part is through the preschool development grant. For those of you who have participated in previous years, I'm going to say that clause a bunch throughout this webinar, so please don't let it go one ear out the other. But for those of you who have participated in previous years, you know that PDG is funded based on a calendar year rather than a fiscal year. And that means that all preschool development grant funding is expiring this year and must be spent before December 31st, 2022. That is a huge, no flexibility. It must be spent, and if it isn't spent, it will revert back to the department with some extra unfun steps in between. So when you're doing your budgets, again, I'm going to have a whole webinar about budgets in the coming months, but you should prioritize any spending that will be done early in this pilot with preschool development grant funding. So again, that funding will be available in EGMS to create your budgets on June 1st. Your budgets are due July 15th. And as soon as your budget is complete, if it is complete, as soon as your budget is complete anytime after July 1, you can start drawing down funds. And again, I am going to harp on y'all about this starting from today all the way through the summer, that please, 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 please submit your budgets urgently and immediately after funding is available in an EGMS so that you can start spending your funding. That is going to be a huge, huge push for us this year to be spending urgently so that we can do all of our fiscal operations responsibly and make sure that we are on track to use every single penny that we have for these seats. A quick question was in the chat from Mary. The rates that I showed are higher than the Ccap rates. They are our birth to 3 seats rates. They are not the Ccap rates exactly. They are slightly higher by about $1,000 each. Some of them a little bit more. And you can find the Ccap rates on Louisiana Believes. If you would like me to specifically pull that for you, I can after this webinar. So one last thing that's kind of on the operations side of all of this is attendance tracking. You're going to be asked to track attendance in a very similar way that you have done for LA4. It's going to be in a Google Sheet that I will share with you later this summer. Once I have all of the participating centers with whom you are going to partner, you will submit this by or before the 10th day of the subsequent month. So if you are submitting March attendance, March 2022 attendance will be due on April 10th, 2022. The birth to 3 seats pilot only cares about present or absent, and we're not taking into account excused or unexcused absences. First initial, first name for first 2 initials of last name for privacy reasons. And I'm going to go over more of this in detail, but this is going to be a huge way for us to track your progress through the pilot. It's going to be a way for us to see who is establishing wait lists, if any, who is on track to meet their allocation. And one last thing is that the department does not set a minimum attendance requirement yet this year for this pilot, but we do encourage you to set an attendance requirement for your community based on what you think is appropriate. If you want to align with that 74% of the month attendance like LA4, Ccap has no more than 5 days a month absent. You can make one that's specific to birth to 3. We encourage you to have one. It is not mandated by the department. And Sorrentha, we are not tracking excused absences because we just want to know whether children are in the seat or are not in the seat. It is not like Ccap where we are having a requirement on attendance. So the department itself does not need to have that level of knowledge. We just want to know whether they're there or they're not there. But for you all, I would encourage to have an excused or unexcused absence policy. Again, because we don't have one in place, we're not going to get that granular with our data. And the question from Emily, will there be a way to track when the child was enrolled versus not enrolled yet? Sometimes they aren't enrolled until the end of the month. I'll go over that when we do attendance trackers later on, but you would just classify them as a dash instead of a 0 or a 1, and that will show that the child is enrolled but not yet attending. So now we're going to jump into center eligibility. In order to participate in this pilot, you as the leaders of your community will determine which centers are best positioned to serve children aged birth to 3 in high quality and joyful and kind and wonderful learning facilities. So in order to participate, there are some requirements that the department sets. The first is that they must be a type 3 center not located in a school setting. They cannot be a center that is associated with, or it cannot be a classroom that is in a school. It has to be its own type 3 center. It is birth to 3 seats, not just birth to 2, Pamela. So then have a performance rating of proficient or above for 21 for the fall 2021-2022 year. And if you are interested in partnering with a new type 3 center that is not yet rated, that is allowable. However, you need to create some additional stipulations in your rationale for the partnership and make additional measures in your partnership agreement with that center. That would be reviewed and approved by me. I might make suggestions on how to strengthen that partnership agreement to add a time frame of this will be temporary until your fall scores come out, that kind of thing. The center must have infant spots available or plan to offer infant spots available in fall of 2022. You can use birth to 3 seats to establish those infant seats, that's fine, but they must be licensed or able to serve infants. And then ensure that these seats are full-time. So full-time is defined as a 30-hour per week minimum or 6 hours of continuous care per day minimum. And that is comes from Bulletin 139 definitions of full-time care. That is in alignment with Ccap. If you have any questions about that, when children come up, they might need some differentiated care because of special needs, because of other requirements. I will get into those specifics during our eligibility webinar, but know that when a child is enrolling with you for birth to 3 seats, they are taking a full-time seat. And I'll get into that, like I said, more specifics per child and eligibility. So then lastly, they must meet the ECAC requirements for teachers. That means that teachers in classrooms where birth to 3 children are placed either have their ECAC already or are enrolled by fall 2022 in an ECAC program approved by the department. Now, these are our minimum basic requirements. You and your community are more than welcome to increase the rigor of center participation. Say, you're a larger network like Jefferson, where you have a ton of centers and you need to kind of draw the line somewhere. You can make it be that it is only high proficient rather than just proficient. That is totally okay with the department, as long as you do not lessen or lower the rigor of participation. These are the baseline. They must be true for every participating center. So like I said, you can consider increasing the rigor if you so choose, to create an application process, to require community involvement or participation in your Ready Start Network meetings, selecting centers who already have an established wait list or high community demand, requiring teacher pay or benefits to be at an established level. I know some folks were interested in doing something like that last year. So just think about ways that you can, continue to support teacher sustainability, center sustainability, and creating a, holistically beneficial environment for not only the children and families, but also for the professionals who are supporting them. So I'm going to take a quick pause here and ask you all to either enter into the chat box or pop off mute and answer either what additional requirements, if you participated previously, did you put in place, or what ideas would you like to implement for center eligibility for this upcoming year? Or you can ask a clarifying question about anything that you have heard so far.
One thing we'd like our teachers to do is or our centers to be ones that have completed TS Gold in the past.
Yeah, I think that would be great. TS Gold or inter-rater reliability, I think is something that you could include. And also that brings up kind of just a separate thought of that any publicly funded seats, I believe it. Leslie Doyle might get mad at me if I'm saying this incorrectly, but they are publicly funded seats are required to participate in TS Gold. So any birth to 3 seat participants should also be participating in TS Gold. So definitely that would be a great thing to implement as well. I see a couple of questions popping up in the chat box, and Pam, I'm coming back to your question that you asked earlier. Saying you're unsure the difference between birth to 3 and Ccap. They are different, and a parent may be eligible for both birth to 3 seats and Ccap. there might be some distinctions that might make a parent eligible for just birth to 3 seats and not Ccap. I will get into that in the specifics of the eligibility webinar. Because we are a pilot, we have a little bit more flexibility with some of the more strict components that Ccap must follow as a federally funded program and a federally established program. And in the webinar for eligibility, I'll go over the differences about that. I see some other messages popped up in the chat box, so I'm just going to kind of read a few of those if there are any questions in there. We've added some training requirements, having folks be required to be class observers, program monitoring by a contracted monitor, 75% attendance for children in Vermilion, requiring tier 1 curriculum to be used, 100% participation in common enrollment events, 74% attendance was also used elsewhere. Really great things added here. Thank you all for your sharing and for your questions, and Tara for being brave and popping off of mute. I appreciate that. So I'm going to keep rolling. And again, if anybody has additional questions, you can pop them in the chat box for now as we talk about family eligibility. So family eligibility, before I get started, this can be overwhelming and it is a lot of information, which is why I have a whole 2-hour webinar in, I think, 2 weeks coming up, where I'm going to go over the most in the weeds, granular, detailed information about all of this. But this is going to be a brief overview. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat box that you would like. But just know there is more information and I will be getting it to you all. So you at their lead agency level are required to determine eligibility for our families participating in birth to 3 seats. That's a little behind the curtain. That's one of the main reasons why this pilot exists in the way that it does, because the department wants to see a model where you all in the community are physically in person helping families with their eligibility, instead of us kind of in the White Tower here in Baton Rouge, working over the phone, working through technology in a way that may not feel as connected, may not feel as supportive to families, especially families who are struggling either financially or with stability or with technology, whatever it is. Those of you who have participated before or who have helped families apply for other publicly funded programs know that they may be in really difficult situations, and having somebody over the phone is just not going to cut it. It's going to be a person in front of them helping, hold their hand through the application process. So also, these are updated and different pieces of information as far as the specifics go. So please, even if you have participated in previous years, pay super close attention to the numbers that I give you, because I have either clarified or something has changed from a previous year, such as the income threshold for birth to 3 seats this year has increased to 85% of the state median income, which is higher than it was previously. This is in alignment with Ccap. Ccap is the same income threshold. So to Pam's question, a family income-wise eligible for Ccap is still also eligible for birth to 3 seats. However, we have some flexibility with one demographic. Families with a minor unmarried parent are this year qualifying at 95% of the state median income. And I want to just give a quick shout out to Christine and Emmy in Lafayette, who made this suggestion specifically to increase the income threshold for these parents. We talked about it here at the department. This is an area of flexibility. We had the reins to do so. So if you have a minor unmarried parent, AKA a person who is under the age of 18, who has a child in need of care, they qualify at a slightly higher income threshold, because we know that a person in that situation needs a little extra help. The other eligibility requirements are that a child who is applying needs full-time care, AKA 30 hours minimum per week or 6 hours of continuous care per day. The parents must be working at least 20 hours per week, or in training at least 20 hours per week, or in school full-time, at least 12 credit hours, or actively seeking employment. They can also be a combination of working or in school. It still must be at or above that 20-hour per week minimum. categorically eligible populations are experiencing homelessness or children in foster care. And in my little purple box to the side, eligibility determination can be a challenging process and requires meticulous review. So anybody on your team who is doing eligibility, if they do not already have my email address or my contact information, please, please, please give it to them. I am available as often as I possibly can be for any questions about eligibility. And there are no secrets between us when it comes to determining an eligibility. I think of me as an extension of your team. And please reach out to me early and often. And Patricia, the question that you asked is a really good one. She asked, Pamela Jones, I'm going to get to your question about the grandparents in just a minute, so I'm going to come back to that. But the question Patricia asked, a center could receive funding from Ccap and B-3 for the same child? No, they cannot. They must not be dual enrolled. They can only be in one or the other program. If they are already enrolled in Ccap, they cannot apply for birth to 3. If they are already in birth to 3 seats, they can apply for Ccap, but only in extended care if you are not offering extended care through birth to 3 seats. That's a really great question, and it has some nuance to it. So if you are either confused or would like to know more, I'm going to talk about that in our eligibility webinar. And in fact, I'm going to make a note of it right now to make sure that I'm really clear. But that is, we cannot double dip, as one might say. So Ccap and B-3 dual enrollment. No. Okay. So Sarintha, there is layering. You can layer or braid with extended care for Ccap. A child just cannot be enrolled in both programs for full time. Again, I'm going to kind of address that in more detail in eligibility in a couple of weeks. I would pause on that question for now. What I'm saying is that what you need to know for today is a child cannot be both enrolled full-time in birth to 3 and full-time in Ccap. Then Amy's question, about flagging the LDOE flagging children since the lead agency is unaware who is on Ccap. We cannot, because we don't know who is going to come through your application process. What I would encourage you to ask your families is if they are already receiving a publicly funded seat, they can, if they're not sure, sometimes families aren't sure, you can contact me on a one-on-one basis. I would encourage the families to call the Ccap support desk to confirm whether or not they have an open case. But it just, we cannot do it for we can't give you a list of every single child who is on Ccap in your network, unfortunately. Yep, and Amy, that question or that response in the chat box is, yep, that is a thing that parents may or may not do. I'm going to actually get into, I think I have a whole 2 or 3 slides about that in the eligibility webinar, about the truthfulness or about, what parents do or do not report, whether it is or isn't accurate. I will say the blanket statement right now is that you can only go based off of what parents tell you. And that is the same kind of tagline for Ccap. Then the analyst over here at the department, it is the same tagline that we'll use for birth to 3. We will take parents at their word, take parents at their paperwork. And if they make an error, whether it is intentional or not intentional, if you did your due diligence based on the guidance given to you by the department, then you and your eligibility team are good to go. Parents should know when they're applying that they are applying for publicly funded seats, and that comes with some oversight from the agencies who monitor those. So if they make an untruthful statement and see that they are receiving funds from 2 different sources that they should not be knowingly, then the onus falls upon their shoulders and not yours. But again, we're going to get into all of that in eligibility in more detail. And then a question from Angela in the chat box: does Ccap allow parents to register as before or after care only? Absolutely, they certainly do. Part-time care or summer care or just holiday care is all available through Ccap. Alrighty, so I'm going to keep rolling. So this is what family eligibility looks like now at the 85% state median income level. These numbers are going to be really important for you all to print out, post on your walls, get memorized with your eligibility team. They are different from previous years. This is in alignment with Ccap. And on the left side, you can see a family size. The right side, the gross monthly income a family can earn in order to be eligible for the birth to 3 seats pilot. So for example, a family of 2, if I am a mother and my child and I are the only ones that's a part of our family, I cannot make more than $3,939 a month in order to qualify for the pilot. If I had 2 children, I would not be able to make more than $4,866 to qualify for the pilot. So understanding income is a little bit, again, it's nuanced. It is calculated based on earned income. So the work pay statements that a parent earns from their job. And then it also includes something that we at the department call unearned income, which is things like alimony, child support, Social Security income, retirement, etc. You would calculate that by adding them up.
Get a copy of this.
Finding the average. I think somebody just popped off of mute. If you could mute yourself, that would be great. And thank you. And you find the average, and that is their average monthly income. It is a little bit more nuanced than that, as I've said. I'm going to go into calculating income eligibility in our eligibility webinar. But for now, that's what you need to know. Ready Start networks will be required to determine eligibility based on income for all families. And one important thing is that, remember, income trumps all. Any family who is over income is not eligible for birth to 3 seats, regardless of other factors. One more time, income trumps all. Any family who is over income is not eligible for birth to 3 seats. That is also true for Ccap. That is a just standard rule with that increase in income from February. So many more people are going to be eligible for seats. That if we are, making exceptions or trying to finagle the lines, it's going to get really messy. Income is your bottom line. Keep that in your, put that on the wall with this poster of the dollar amounts. So many of you, like I've said several times this webinar, have previously participated in this pilot. That means that you will be, and maybe already have, in the process of redetermination for a family, because you have enrolled infants and 2-year-olds and 1-year-olds who may not yet have aged out of the pilot. That is wonderful. We would love for any child to remain in this pilot for as long as it exists, for as long as they are age-wise eligible. So redetermining eligibility includes notifying families of the eligibility documents needed, notifying families of the deadline, which is 1 year after their application date for returned documents. You verify the eligibility once again as if it's a brand new application. And note that previously deemed eligible families through actively seeking employment for this upcoming year must be employed or in training for subsequent years of eligibility. And then you place or return the children into the seat. It does not necessarily need to require removing or placing the child. The child should not be really impacted in any way, shape, or form. If this is done smoothly, you just get additional documents for the updated year and the child continues in care. It is our recommendation that you begin this redetermination process about 45 days prior to 1 year enrolled. So for example, if a child was enrolled on September 1st, 2021, that you contact that family in mid-July 2022 to gather redetermination documents, so that by September 1st, 2022, you have everything you need to say, yep, this family was eligible, they are still eligible, this child is eligible for another 12 months of care. And then for children who are age 3 in the previous year, please support them into transitioning into LA4 or another 4-year-old program. So now I'm going to get into the planning document. I know there were quite a few questions that popped up about eligibility. I'm just going to hang out on this slide here and give everybody a chance. If there wasn't a question answered about eligibility, again, knowing that I'm going to go into a lot more detail about this in a couple of weeks. But if there's anything that I did not yet address that you would like to hear about, or you're not going to be able to go to bed tonight, please either drop it in the chat box or come off of mute now. Okay. So Pamela asked, what if they live with their grandparents? Do they need to use the grandparents' income, or can they use their income in order to qualify? So a household is determined based upon the biological or legal guardian of the child. So if the child itself is living with his or her or their grandparent, and the biological or legal mother or father is not involved and the grandparents have custody, the grandparents can apply as if they are the parent of the child. The grandparents cannot apply on behalf of the child if they are not the legal guardian or custodial guardian of that child. It must be the legal guardian of the child who applies. And that's for several reasons, but the one that I like to think about is kind of the most extreme version, but we wouldn't want somebody to kidnap a child and start applying without actual legal documents that they have the child for real. So if you think about it in that extreme of a case, you say, oh yeah, that makes sense why somebody else couldn't apply on behalf of this child. We want to make sure that their actual parent is actually applying. And households do include a kind of limited number of people. So it's only the legal or biological guardian of the child, his or her legal or non-legal spouse, and then any dependent children that lives in the household. So for example, if I live with my adult parents, I'm over the age of 18 and I have a child, my parents' income and my parents would not count as part of the household because they are not legally required to care for my child. I am the only one legally required to care for my child. So I am the only one who would be counted on the application. I will go into some more specifics about those scenarios again in the eligibility webinar, but that's the short version, that's not very short, of that question. So thank you for that, Pam. I'm going to scroll down and see. Amy asked if you're allowed to set one daily rate regardless of the child age. For example, all infants or 1 to 3-year-olds at $45 per day. You can, however, what I foresee is that your centers will not want to have infants in care through birth to 3 seats because you would be paying them significantly less than other publicly funded seats like Ccap. So you can do that. However, I would encourage you to pay a rate that is competitive with what Ccap is paying your centers. I also want to remind about the 70% of your funding per day to be, or not funding per day, 70% of your allocation to be used on direct payments to centers. So if you are paying at a rate that is the same for all children, I would encourage you to consider the implications of that for not only your infants, but also your 1 to 3-year-olds. You'd be paying them in order to do that in such a way that you're not shorting your centers on infant rates. You'd be grossly overpaying on your toddler and 3-year-old rates. So I would just really caution you on that. And we can talk more about that specifically, Amy, but that's my answer for now. I do have a slide with the 95% rates, Amy, that is going to be in our eligibility webinar. Okay. The grandparent, if the grandparent is caring for the child, unless they have a disability, if they are still, unless they have a disability that precludes them from being able to care for the child during the day, they still have to work or be actively seeking employment. That's Angela's question in the chat box. Income trumps all. It does, unfortunately, trump all with families experiencing homelessness. I will say that I have yet to see a case. I've worked very closely with Birth to 3 Seats and Ccap for the last almost 3 years. And I have not yet seen a case where a family who was truly experiencing homelessness also was over the income. So if you do come across a situation where you find a family who is truly experiencing homelessness and they are over the income, please flag me and let me know, and I can go through those documents with you, because that is the rule. And however, like I said, based on what I have seen from many cases, the likelihood of both being true at the same time is very small. I see a question from Amy. A child can become eligible if the legal parent does not have any U.S. Can a child become eligible if the legal parent does not have any U.S. legal documentation, such as an ID or social security card? Yes, they do not have to be a legal resident of the country. However, they have to provide all of the other eligibility documentation, some of which is difficult to get if you are not a legal resident of the country. So I'm going to go over all of that documentation. Amy, you have seen a lot of that documentation before. A social security card is not required for a parent. However, things like their work documentation, their pay statements, or they must have some form of identification, whether it is a government issued ID that's not a driver's license, or even a library card would work, but it is hard to get a library card without other pieces of documentation. So I say yes. However, there are a lot of caveats. And if you come to a situation where you have a family who is not the parents are not legal residents, the child is, and you want help ensuring that they are able to be certified, or that they are eligible for this pilot, please reach out to me. Okay. Okay, I see some following up. Yeah, so I think I've addressed the homeless question, but I will again. So in previous years, the question about whether homeless families experiencing homelessness being categorically eligible trumped income or the other way around, it was not clear. Emmy, it was, the homelessness always trumped the other. However, I would imagine that most times the families who were in that situation also did not flag you as somebody who was over the income threshold. I might be wrong. And so definitely push back and let me know offline or one-on-one if that was a case for you. But I would imagine that if a family is truly experiencing homelessness, they are verified through your McKinney-Vento liaison. They will also not be over the income threshold, especially now that it has been raised. To that significantly higher amount. So I think I've come to the end of the questions in the chat box. That was very great, really great questions, everybody. I'm definitely going to make sure that these are all revisited in our eligibility webinar. Yes, also you should definitely request income for all families, regardless of whether they are experiencing homelessness, in foster care, working, actively seeking employment, etc. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the planning document. So here we're going to talk about a Word document that I will be sending out to all of you at the end of this session. That is going to be kind of your guiding light, your lighthouse throughout the next couple of months for this work. As I mentioned at the top of this training, or this webinar, excuse me, this will be due back to me by May 6th. And your plan will include the centers with whom you've decided to partner and your rationale for that partnership, the allocations of seats and age group by site, the partnership agreement draft or drafts if you're choosing to do some slightly varied ones depending on the types of centers or the centers that you're partnering with, eligibility determination preparation, your budget draft, including 70% or more dedicated to seats with individual network rates per seat. And then other responses to planning questions such as recruitment strategies, cost of care per age in your community, internal business office planning, et cetera. And we're going to go into some more of those specifics now so you can get some ideas on what you'll be asked to do and potentially get some ideas from your peers here. So one of the sets of questions about, one of the sets of questions in the planning document is about your administrative responsibilities. So indicating which childcare centers with whom you'll partner, your rationale for that partnership, estimated allocations by age, how you're going to ensure centers meet your requirements for birth to 3 seats, how you plan to recruit families, who in your business office or finance office issues payments to centers, who submits reimbursement requests, and PER reports in EGMS. So as you can see, these questions, they're separated out into more detailed categories in the planning document itself. These are consolidated so that it could be on one slide. But as you can see, it's going to ask you a lot of things from kind of the child-facing, the family-facing side to what's happening behind the scenes. And I have found that in including some of these questions about your business office and the behind the scenes stuff, I think it tremendously helped set y'all up better in this past year for, doling out the funds, planning for how to budget, planning for when funds would go to centers. So thinking about all of those things now is going to make the upcoming months of this pilot significantly easier. Partnership agreements, there is a template included in the planning document that you will be required to edit and make your own with some, different areas that I've, put in parentheses with potential options. You can scrap it and make your own. I think Lydia, I remember yours last year from Iberville was several pages long, but super, super detailed in what the community network or the Ready Start network would be doing to support the centers, what the centers would do, what their how they would pay their teachers, how they would participate in professional development, what they would do with families, et cetera. So you can really truly make this whatever you see fit, as long as, like I said at the beginning, you're not lessening or lowering the rigor for centers. And I would encourage you to also think really creatively here how you can set centers up for success and set centers up to really accomplish the goals that you have in, for example, your Ready Start Network blueprints, or getting them to participate more abundantly. That's not the right word, but I hope that you understand what I mean. Participate more in your family engagement activities throughout the year and in the spring recruitment times, et cetera. So this is another page of what you will see. And I also just want to pause here and note that there is a part in the partnership agreement where you may or may not say either the specific number or the range or the amount of dollars or the amount of seats that a center may receive from you. And I just encourage you to not write yourself into a hole or write yourself into a corner that doesn't allow you and the center flexibility, because as we have learned throughout the last couple of years of this pilot, families may need different things than what your center offers. They may, have that pretend family with quadruplets might want to go at a center where you were only intending to place 3 seats, but you don't want to separate that family because it wouldn't be right for them. So just make sure as you're thinking about this partnership agreement, you're really thinking about kind of all the things that could happen, all the things you want to happen, and all the things that you don't want to happen. So the last bullet here that I've included is that you as the Ready Start Network have the right to remove children and funding from X center at any point during the year if you find that the center is out of compliance with any listed agreement requirements or in violation of any requirements listed within Bulletin 137. I highly encourage you to, if not including that specific language, include some kind of language that allows you to remove the children from care or remove maybe materials and supplies or anything that is coming from birth to 3 seats if necessary. You know, we hate to think about that as an option, but it is something that folks have faced before. And I'm sure that if not with this pilot, you've seen it happen in other cases. So just making sure that you cross all your T's, dot all your I's, and set yourself up and your centers up for success while maintaining care for children. So your planning document will also ask you about your enrollment planning. And I do, want to acknowledge that many of you already have an enrollment process that happens in a set time frame during the spring. However, many of you also are going to have to be recruiting families throughout the year. Your enrollment, nobody, with maybe a few exceptions, has ever been fully enrolled in August. So you're going to have to think about what enrollment is going to look like in September, October, November, as you're trying to fill those seats throughout the year, and make sure that you are reaching out to the families who most need your support, who most need this pilot. So talking about either zip codes or neighborhoods in your community that are underserved, ways that you're going to reach out to demographics of people who are underserved. Maybe you have a large Vietnamese speaking population in your community or a Spanish speaking population in your community that has not yet been served well by your centers, and you're going to take some steps with this funding to reach out to them, and think about ways that maybe other funding has not allowed you to expand into those realms. One thing I mentioned previously in the allowable uses is thinking about hiring either a full-time or part-time person to be a translator for your families, who is bilingual, who can help families in a way that maybe you or other members of your staff have not yet been able to. The funding is from July 1st, 2022. I keep forgetting what year we're in now that we're saying this. It's from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. You can, if you do your timing, as I have tried to guide you already, if you time everything right, you can and could draw down funds July 1, enroll children July 1, and have them be enrolled for 12 months of care all the way through June 30th. We are not, we are going to require, and I actually am now realizing I don't think that I put that in this slide deck, so I'm going to write it down now and add to it after. In previous years, we have allowed this to only include 10 months of care. However, for this upcoming year, we are going to require that this is a 12-month, this will meet 12 months of care for children, that it will exceed, no 10-month only, unless the family decides to drop out and leave and you replace it with another child, or replace that family with another child, but that this must meet 12 months of care. I am now recognizing that it has not been put in a slide yet. So thank you so much for that question. And I will make that edit after this. So now I have time to open up for some discussion. Yeah, exactly. It makes sense. Parents do need 12 months of care. That's exactly why we made the extension. Thank you so much, Mary. I appreciate that. And I do think that most of the participants in previous years have extended through 12 months of care, but we did maintain that flexibility for the second year. But I do just want to make it clear now, 12 months only, because people need care in the summer too. So I have some questions here, and I would love to just hear some folks pop off of mute, or again, jump into the chat box and share your answers to some of these questions, or ask questions about something that I may have already said, specifically thinking about enrollment. So I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes and hopefully hear from some of you.
Devin, this is Manny.
Hey, Manny, thank you so much for popping off of mute.
Okay. listen, so if we're gonna be able to do the 12 months, the EGMS system would be available, I presume the month of June, to start doing what we need to do with budgets and the super app section or whatever it is that we do in there.
Correct. So June 1st, you will be able to open up EGMS and start submitting your budgets. It will have to go through the normal approval process like any budget in EGMS for any allocation. Our end of the department knows that you are all going to be aiming for July 1, starting, drawdown, starting anything in EGMS. And so we are going to be on high alert for any submitted budgets so that you can start drawing down funds as early as July 1st.
Second
Okay.
question.
Go ahead.
When we do the planning of the seats, sometimes what we submit to you during actually the year, those numbers change. You're gonna require for us to amend that every time?
So your question is, if you put in your budget, the number of seats you added to a center, if that number changes, then will it require an amendment?
Yes.
The answer is yes, with a caveat. I'm going to try to help assist you writing your budgets in such a way that you are not pigeonholed into moments like that where you have to write an amendment every single time children's enrollment switches around. If you do write it in such a way that it says, ABC Center is going to get exactly $12,000 this year, and all of a sudden for 2 children, and all of a sudden they get 10 additional children, yep, they're going to have to write an amendment because that's going to be significantly different. However, you don't necessarily need to write an amendment every time that happens, because if you do, parents and children move around way faster than EGMS can ever keep up with. I mean, good Lord, all of you, I think, would attest to that. So I would potentially revisit every quarter, again, during our EGMS webinar, and I'm actually going to write that down to make sure that I'm guiding.
My next question, somebody just popped that question.
Okay, good. Let's see, I see a couple other questions. So Pam asked in the chat box to me, are the first to 3 seats only for new or incoming enrollment, or does this apply to children all currently enrolled? And how do we find out how many seats we were awarded? I'm going to answer your second question first. You should have received on Monday, March, I think it was the 13th, on Monday, March 13th in your email, a PDF document with your LA4, birth to 3, and NSCCD seat allocations that are being brought to April Bessie. Pam, if you did not receive that, please direct message me or send me an email requesting that, and I can send it to you again. The birth to 3 seats is intended for new children. So it should be used for children who have not previously enrolled in another seat, who have previously not enrolled in any other publicly funded program. So for example, what we wouldn't want to happen is a child jumping off of Ccap to get birth to 3 seats, because that takes away, we don't want to create competition in that way. We want to be able to serve all children. So, however, as I think it was Amy who noted, sometimes, parents may not be entirely forthcoming with what they've had before, or it may be really difficult to track that down. I would just say use your best judgment, and in making sure that, the purpose of this pilot is to expand access for children who do not yet have access to great childcare. So in your recruitment and enrollment, find families who, are not enrolled yet. If you are finding that, you're having trouble reaching out to those families, that there are families who would greatly benefit and have been struggling in centers to pay tuition, then, loop in with me and we can, talk about some options for you. But please do prioritize children who have not yet been enrolled in care or not yet enrolled in some kind of publicly funded seat. Okay, so I see another question. Word of mouth has been Pamela Jones's best advertising. Are you limited to the seats that you can have in your center? Not necessarily. The only limit that you have is the funding that you have been allocated. So if you And of course, license capacity. We don't want you to, go over what you're legally allowed to have in a potential center. But I would say, also think about what is best for your, the professional environment in your community. Putting every seat at one center could be really great. It might also really alienate and challenge another center in your area who may be equally as great. It might be really difficult for that center to compete with a center where you've placed all of your seats. Now, that might just be the way the cookie crumbles for that center, because maybe they're not meeting other expectations. Maybe they're not doing, maybe they're not highly proficient or proficient in such a way that you've, determined needs to be true for your centers to participate. However, I would just encourage you to really deeply think about and at least offer or open the conversation with every eligible center in your community. Okay.
It's Amy from Natchitoches. I have a question.
Yes.
It's back on slide 14, when you mentioned that we cannot use the funding for a type 3 center that is housed in a school setting. We had included in our CSBAE grant and Believe grant the hopes of having some of these P2G birth to 3 scholarship children in one of the facilities we would open in a school setting. Can you provide us with a little bit more rationale as to why we can't use them in a school setting?
Yep. So the intention for this pilot is, like I've said, not only to support children and families who have not been able to afford childcare, it is also intended to help stabilize the childcare business itself. We know that schools have additional public funds to be able to remain sustainable, to be able to remain open year after year because of, the type of establishment they are. Whereas type 3 centers and other family childcare centers, other childcare providers don't have the same stability that school sites do have. The intention of this pilot is to help stabilize childcare. And I can loop back with you and Amy Poirier on my team to talk more about the implications of your, Believe in CSBAE application, because you mentioned those things. But yes, it is a hard and fast line that these cannot be placed in school sites and they must be placed in diverse delivery. Amy, does that at least answer your question for now?
It does. That's great. I just want to make sure that when I go back to the team to visit and give them that information, I'm giving them the same terminology and expectation that the state.
Yep. Yeah. And if Amy and anybody, this goes for anybody, if anybody needs, to kick the can to the department or kick the can to me and say like, well, Devin told me this, it's out of my hands. Please let me be that person for you. I'd be happy to put, my name to any of the restrictions that may be unpleasant for somebody on the community's end to hear, but that, is right. So just let me know how I can go to bat for you and I will be more than happy to. Okay, so I'm scrolling through. Tara anticipates timing to be challenging. People not liking to spend money until it's there. Yeah, definitely. Qualifying families in June, absolutely. As soon as you get the eligibility requirements from us, you are more than welcome to start helping to determine eligibility. That's one of the reasons why, I think almost everybody on this call who has been here before, can attest that this is the earliest start we've ever gotten. And I'm trying so hard to get in alignment with y'all's actual recruitment during the year. And, we're getting closer and closer every year. An updated calculator spreadsheet to help determine the budget. I would say yes-ish, Lola, about that. The planning document itself, once you see it, I think will provide a lot of support to you. However, I don't have a spreadsheet calculator, mostly because very few people used it last year. So I didn't want to spend time building one out that wasn't going to be used. So I will help you individually as needed. I did see that I think Emmy from Lafayette raised a hand. Emmy, do you want to pop off mute and ask a question if that was not by accident.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Awesome. So I just wanted to verify, I did see on your slide that the recertification did change for families who were previously actively seeking employment, had to be employed or in school, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, but that eligibility will allow them to stay certified until their re-eligibility date
Correct.
into this new year. So although the expectation changed, we can still keep them in until, so they technically still have time to find work or school if they're,
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
If their
Yeah.
eligibility isn't until September, they have until September to prove work or school, or then they would be disqualified.
Definitely, definitely. And to the extreme point of if you enrolled somebody yesterday based on actively seeking employment, since you guys did not have that information on hand until today, that person would still be actively seeking employment qualified for 12 months until, what was yesterday, the 22nd? Until March 2023. Exactly.
I gotcha. Okay.
So, you know, and that adds kind of a cog in the machine of this eligibility determination. It's something I think many of you who have done this before are starting to realize, like, oh, as we get people kind of scattered throughout the year, that means that there's more to track throughout the year. It makes it easier if you are able to enroll everybody in one lump time period, just like you do with your coordinated enrollment. However, you're probably going to have some stragglers and people who are enrolled at different times, and that is totally okay. It is just something for you to consider when you're entering into this pilot, when you're doing your planning document, thinking about what are you going to do for those families who apply in January, who have 12 months of eligibility based upon the eligibility criteria that was given for that fiscal year. And you know, what you're going to do operationally or logistically to make sure that they are well taken care of.
So to piggyback on that question, if we redetermine eligibility sooner than 12 months, is there any issue with that?
No, I don't think so. I think that is fine.
Okay, like last year, we did a bulk of redeterminations in this transition when we knew they were staying in the center. And only if the parent needed more time to gather the documents did we use their eligibility recertification date, in a sense, to give them more time to redetermine eligibility. But if they didn't, they all redetermined to continue to be eligible.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Not that I don't want families to be eligible, but we had some families that rolled over with the eligibility of seeking work. And so that would almost be like a third year if they were an infant, in a sense, seeking work. So I appreciate that extra
definitely.
stringent.
Yeah. And, you know, just again, I don't mean to confuse anybody, but I am going to reference Ccap quite a bit because we've aligned in many ways to Ccap with a few caveats. What Emmy just brought up is that in the previous years of this pilot, actively seeking employment allowed for a family to receive care for 12 months. With Ccap, they only get 90 days. And then they cannot apply again for 2 years if they are not employed by the end of that 90 days. So there is a lot of flexibility in some components of birth to 3 seats. That is not true for Ccap. But like Emmy said, we are getting a little bit more restrictive so that you know, families are able to find financial stability. They're not dependent upon just the pilot for financial stability. And so that, you know, families are able to transition into other programs when their children age out of birth to 3 seats. So I see a question about birth to 3 seats has indirect costs. Yes, it does. You should contact your business office about the amount of indirect costs or the percentage of indirect costs that that your community network takes. Leslie asked a question about foster children only needing placement orders from DCFS. I'm going to circle back to you about foster children, Leslie, in the eligibility webinar. But for now, we're going to pause on that question because I don't want to give you the incorrect answer. Income, my first response is that income still does trump all. However, DCFS may be able to help us out there. Amy asked a question about, do I foresee the new EdLink attendance tracker for Ccap students an option for attendance tracking for scholarship students? That is something that Farishay, my friend over here, would love to see being asked. And I truly have absolutely no hand in the EdLink situation, but I have heard that question be asked from colleagues of mine at the department before, Amy. So I do hope that that is true. I see a couple of people have raised hands. So Emmy, I think yours is still raised from the previous one, but I see Carmen from Tangi and then Angela. Carmen, you can go first, and then Angela.
Hey, Devin, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, so mine is about eligibility and approving them right now. We're actually over what our allocation was. So we don't have space to put children in right now. So we anticipate having space when our 3s transition to 4-year-olds. So my question is, if we're taking apps now, should we go ahead and collect the income information now, or wait until July to get that income information? Because if we can't place them until July or August, then for lack of a better term, they're wasting months of eligibility.
Yeah.
My thought was to wait and collect that income information closer to when we can place them. But my concern was the app date is going to be, say, March 23rd, but the check stubs may be July, August. Is that a red flag, or should we go ahead and get the income information now?
No, I think that's actually a great point. And what I would just do is make a cover sheet or a note. So my first answer for you for timing, and anybody on this call for timing of eligibility determination, is unless you're, going totally to the extreme of not collecting documents for months and months and months, do what's best for your community network. Do what's best for you if you're the one determining eligibility in those situations. So Carmen, if you think it is easier for you and your team to collect eligibility documents now, then just do it and let them enroll, and then have them, knowing that we're going to do everything we can to continue care for them next year.
Okay, but
however,
if we wait, it's not going to be a red flag that the app date was so much.
No, and what I'll say is just add a cover sheet for any family that you've said, okay, they're going to be eligible. We're just going to get their eligibility documents a little bit later. Add just a cover sheet saying, this child has been preliminarily approved on this date. We will collect eligibility documents on X date, and I can actually make a template cover sheet.
Okay, or could we just write it on the eligibility sheet?
Yeah, you can do that too, for sure. As long as you have an explanation for why things are out of the ordinary and you are able to prove why that is what it is, then you should be good to go. Does that answer your question, Carmen? Is there anything else?
Yes, the only thing is sometimes you don't know if they qualify today.
Right.
And their work may change by that time. So we're explaining that to parents, but
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I would.
Right now. So we have them on our list to call back at the end of July to get that information. So we're just trying to decide. I have a team meeting Friday, and we're trying to work out, do we go ahead and collect it now and just get eligibility again a year from now, or call them back in July? So that's
I would call them back in July, and then just have maybe even just have their application date and then your review date be in July, and then that will work out.
Got it. Yes, that answers my question. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. And Angela, your turn.
Okay, mine was a similar question. So we're doing enrollment now. We're getting applications in with the income eligibility. So I was wondering, if we did something before they actually enroll and ask, is their information still the same, or give me 2 more updated check stubs, then can it count from that date, or will it count from the date of the application that we reviewed it and we're approving or preliminarily approving the applications? What's the date that it will start? And if I could get them to sign something saying it's not changed in August or before they enroll, can the eligibility date then be that date?
Yeah. So I think I'm going to respond with something that isn't directly answering your question, but hopefully answering your question. And if I'm not, just say, nope, Devin, you didn't do it. So I would encourage everybody on this call to not allow a lapse of time to occur between the parent's application, any eligibility documents they send, and when you look at the application. If there is a situation where there's some kind of lapse in time, whether it's a week, whether it's 2 or 3 months, I would encourage you to ask families to submit additional documents, because like Carmen said, you know, family situations can really change quickly, and we can't, I don't want you to be in a situation or to put families in a situation where they are tempted to say, oh yeah, everything's the same, when it's not. They know it's not, and it puts them in a bad position when they do their taxes in the spring, or when they are reviewed for whatever auditing happens on the family side of things. So if the timeline is not lining up, I would say, or if they didn't give you something, you know, say they submitted their application, you're able to review it at, you know, 5 days after they submitted it, and they did not give you everything they need, they should use the date of your review when you've contacted them again to be that like 45-day window of when they can and should have documents that match what their income is. So going back 45 days from your review date, rather than necessarily, the application date, because it's not their fault if you didn't review it for 5 days, 10 days, etc. However, I would err on the side of getting additional documents always, because you don't want a family to, it is better to have them do a little extra work to prove that they are eligible, and rather than say, oh, I don't want to make them go through this hoop, and then they're actually not eligible. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, but as long as I determine they're eligible like now, but if the spot if they're not starting to August, like the previous person said, that's still fine. Is that kind of what?
Can you
was
say that one
said?
more time? I'm sorry, you cut out.
So we are determining eligibility now, but they may not enroll until August. So it will still be the date. Now's date is the date that would be used for the 12
Yes,
months.
if you determined their eligibility now and said that their enroll date is July 1st or August 1st, their eligibility hinges upon the date that you determined them eligible.
Okay.
And I see, and Sorrentha said in the chat box, according to monitoring, check stubs must be dated within or less than 60 days from the application date. That might impact eligibility reviews that are delayed. Yep. So I will make the cover letter that I'm talking about, if there is a situation where the application and the review date are significantly not close to each other, that will attempt to help you guys. Again, if you, like Sorrentha said, if it is outside of that 60 days, really, if you are reviewing a case outside of 60 days from their, or reviewing an application outside of 60 days from their application date, something is going wrong with your systems, and we need to discuss it, or maybe they got lost in the shuffle, or they were incorporated into a coordinated enrollment situation that wasn't aligned with what these upcoming eligibility requirements are now. So I would err on the side, like I said to Angela, ask for additional documents so that you can absolutely positively verify they are eligible. Even if you feel like, oh gosh, I don't want to ask this family to go through an additional hoop, they're getting free childcare, they can go through the hoop. Just help them out as much as you can, but they can do it. Okay, I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat box. I don't see any additional hands raised. I'm going to just double check one more time. Oops. Okay, yep. Alrighty, so I'm going to move to the next slide. So this is just a suggested, family application timeline. So you might have an initial meeting with a family. discuss the pilot, discuss the opportunity, et cetera. They submit their application, you verify eligibility. They have to have their eligibility documentation must be within 60 days of their application date or 2 months. So for example, their pay statements cannot be outside of that. If it's 61 days from the day that they submit their application, you can't use it. And again, 2 months is 60 days. So not like if they apply in March, it doesn't go back to, it's not just like the general window of March, April, May, or March, February, January. It is 60 days from that application date. So if it's January or March 23rd, going back 60 days from March 23rd. Then verify eligibility. We, again, like I said, I recommend no more than 10 days after the submitted application for you to review. You should enroll children experiencing homelessness immediately if they are verified through your McKinney-Vento liaison. Again, as I mentioned, their income verification may say that they are not eligible. And again, just loop me in on any conversations with conversations about eligibility documentation where that is an issue. I do not anticipate it being an issue, and that might just be hopeful thinking on my part, but definitely keep me up to date. And then enroll the child. So notify the family, enroll the child as soon as the seat is available. Hopefully it already is by the time they've gone through that process. And then I also just encourage you at the bottom, this purple box says to estimate the turnaround time for your office to process eligibility and accept or reject an application. So that's kind of what Carmen and Angela and Sarintha have mentioned, or who have hinted at, their application date is what really matters for monitoring. It's what we are, making our decisions on with their eligibility documentation, with their enrollment. So if you are enrolling children, or if you're reviewing eligibility, just make sure that you're being really cognizant of time so that, like I said, families are getting free childcare. If they need to jump through the extra hoop, they absolutely can and should, but try not to make them so that you're doing things urgently on your end. So use of funds. This is another discussion slide. There are a couple big things here, such as what adjustments will you need to make in order to accommodate the new 70% funding going towards seats requirement? How are you going to leverage these seats to help stabilize childcare? What big picture problems do you think you could address in your community through the Birth to 3 Seats activities? And how can you use Birth to 3 Seats to increase family engagement? I see something popped up in the chat box. If you want to pop off of mute or ask a question, please do so. I see one already in the chat box from Pam and Jefferson Davis. So Pam, this is a great clarifying question, and I really appreciate you asking it, excuse me. So there's a couple of phrases here that I've probably been using interchangeably where I should not have. There's the family's application date, your review of eligibility, and the enrollment of the child. The application date and the documents that come with that application need to or have stipulations. The eligibility documents must be dated within 60 days of that application. We ask at the department that you review that application no more than 10 days after that application is submitted. If you review that application, say I'm applying in Jefferson Davis for, I'm going to pretend my dog Winston is a child, I'm applying for Winston, and I gave you everything I need in order to be eligible today. You review it and you say, Devin, you and Winston are a part of this pilot, you're good to go, but we can't enroll you until August. That is okay. You would not need to do any additional documentation. If you upfront say that my enrollment date is August 1st, most of you in the past have either put in your eligibility documentation, your collection of documents for families, the start date for the child, and that is okay. The time where you would need to redetermine eligibility, or if a family provides you documentation that is either insufficient or it is confusing or conflicting, or, we're going to go over examples in that eligibility webinar in a couple of weeks. But if for some reason they have something that gives you pause in your review process, that is when you would want to go back and ask them for additional documentation. The application date and enrollment date do not have a requirement tied to them. I would encourage you to not have a family apply now and then enroll in December. I would encourage you to have them, reapply if they can't enroll right away, or enroll in that, initial fall burst of children getting into care. And if that is something that you come upon, definitely let me know and we can talk through it. But you would not need to do an additional application and eligibility determination process if you have.
Devin,
Yes.
so in that scenario, would we need to do a redetermination in March of next year, or would they be eligible from August to August because that was the start date?
This, that is a good question. Let me think about that.
That's our whole problem we're running into, because we
Yeah,
can wait until August, but then we're gonna have to redetermine them in March. So they
Right.
wasted that many months of eligibility. That's why we were wondering, should we wait until August to qualify them? Because they would be qualified for an entire.
yeah. I think that's a great question. I think that this is always the answer that nobody wants to hear. I would turn it back to you and think about what is best for you and what your office is capable of doing eligibility determination wise. Emmy popped off of mute earlier and from Lafayette and said that she did kind of a lump eligibility redetermination for families between year 1 and year 2 for Lafayette, because she didn't want to have to do what you described for families who were determined, halfway through the year. She redetermined them early in some cases so that she could get them all on the same schedule. I think that worked out for her. Maybe Emmy, if you and Carmen want to connect, and maybe anybody else wants to connect with Emmy to see how she implemented that. But because y'all are doing this work in the, you have your hands on the documents, how many children you are facing going through this paperwork for, I would encourage you to, make the decision that's best for y'all. However, if you determine eligibility on the date of the application, then that 12 months of eligibility is from the date of the application, not the date of enrollment. So that is what like monitoring and what we at the department would be looking for if a child was to enroll today with all of the application requirements and not start until August. That child, if that child was to be pulled for a monitoring event after March 23rd, 2023, it would come up as a red flag that you did not have additional documents to prove why that child was eligible. This is a great series of questions though, and for our eligibility webinar, I'm gonna make some slides that will make this a lot more clear and give like some scenarios and maps, and I really appreciate that. Y'all have brought that up. I hope that I answered the question. Carmen, were you the one who asked that out loud? I think she was. If I didn't answer your question, Carmen, or whomever asked that question. please
Sorry,
tell me.
yes. We were.
Okay, good.
We were reading this and talking about it.
Oh, good. That's okay. Yeah, so Amy and Natchitoches said that even parents who approved in late November, they redetermined them in the spring just so that they didn't have to do that. And they provided that information to them up front, saying that this is when we're going to kind of collectively do that. So that was, I think, a system that worked well for Amy and Natchitoches. And then, yeah, Emmy, used, she says redetermination, they start in late May or July, late May for July eligibility. And then created that system there. So that's really helpful. Thank you, Amy and Emmy, for sharing your wisdom from previous years, and other folks for asking these really great questions. We have been talking a lot about eligibility determination. I do want to open up the conversation though for any either questions or discussion about uses of funds, and to see if there's anybody who has any thoughts on that. All right, I'm not hearing or seeing anything, so I'm going to continue to move on. If you do have a question though, please, again, put it in the chat box. So EGMS, your planning document, is going to ask you some really specific questions about your budget, about when you're planning to request reimbursements, and when you are going to submit your periodic expense reports, what will be on it. You know, I'm trying to, again, like I said earlier, set you all up for success as much as I possibly can with EGMS, get these funds flowing as quickly as possible. I know everybody's budget office in your community is very different from, you know, other offices, and it is one of the slowest of all things that we face with children and supporting them. So trying to prepare as much as possible now, I think will greatly help you in the future. So in your budget, in your planning document, hopefully, you know, you'll be able to eventually just copy and paste that into EGMS after you get feedback from me, and provide your per center and per age and number of seats, allocation by age in your lines in your planning document. You can add lines as needed, make it as detailed or as close to what you would put in EGMS as possible. Remember that in EGMS, reimbursement documentation is optional. It's going to request your budget code, dates of the reimbursement period, descriptions of the expenses. You can submit reimbursements as quickly as you need. And then for periodic expense reports, or PERs, as we call them at the department, I know some offices outside of the department call them PERs, but documentation is required for those. So in your planning document, it might be asked, how are you going to collect that documentation? Where are you going to store it? How quickly are you going to upload it into EGMS, et cetera? And also note that even if no spending occurred in a quarter, which I really hope that that does not happen, because there are 3 significant months of care that happen in the July through September time period. So please spend money during that time, because children will be enrolled in your centers during that time. But please note that even if you did not spend any money, you still have to submit a PER. And that's true for every single budget, every single allocation, every single fund source in EGMS. You will always have to submit a PER, regardless of whether you spent money. And then I encourage you to contact your business office with questions you might have regarding EGMS reimbursements and PER submissions, because a lot of questions that I've received over the last couple of years are actually better asked to your budget office first, than to the department. I do see 2 questions popped up in the chat box. Are we allowed to braid some funding with the Believe grant on the enrollment vehicle to drive to areas to apply for B-3 seats? Absolutely. If it is being used for B-3 seat enrollment, yes, you can. That's a great question. So like I said, working with your business office, I have some specific questions for you to answer, and like, who in your finance office do you need to speak with in order to process reimbursements? How long does your office take to process reimbursements? When are the staff in the business offices likely to be out of office, so that I have it as first person, you can prepare documents prior to their leave. That's going to be especially pertinent during the summer months when you're submitting your budgets. Know now if somebody's going to be out of office who needs to approve your budget before you submit it to EGMS, because these summer months are a particularly tricky time with school systems. So if your people are going to be out of office in that June month this year, when you're trying to submit your budget for B-3 seats, make sure that your powers that be approve it before they go away, so that you can submit reimbursements in a timely manner in July. And next, there's now, this is new for this year, a section that is specifically about determining eligibility. So I'm asking you to fill me in on who on your staff will lead eligibility determination at your community network. Please put their contact information there. Also, please give it to me as early as possible so I can keep them looped in on all of this information. How will you maintain files for families so that they're prepared for the LDOE yearly audit, or also we call it the monitoring event? How will you communicate the requirements to interested families? I'm not going to read every question to you, but I do encourage you for that specific question for number one, that team members who are determining eligibility should be very, very, very comfortable asking questions and checking in with me or any other community network corresponding person. The folks in Jefferson should be comfortable talking to the folks in EBR to say, hey, I got this case. This is what I did. Does that look right to you? If for some reason you're not able to get a hold of me, or you prefer to go to that person, your counterpart in a different parish, the personally identifiable information should always, remain anonymous and secret, but there should not be any secrets about, the questions that you have for me to be able to help you. I am not the person monitoring. So you can ask me, you can run by me, you can do anything that you want that has anything to do with eligibility with me. I can be as involved as you'd like me to be, so that you and your families are as clear as possible in what eligibility looks like, and that you are as confident as possible that every family that you have enrolled is 100% eligible for this pilot. So I have here the deadline for things for kind of the rest of the year, and the reminders that where PERs are due, where there are other EGMS related deadlines. The 10th of the month is always going to be the date that attendance is due, and the 15th of December is when I want to flag for you that you should have all PDG spending either done or like ready to swipe the cards or the pay, write the checks no later than December 15th, so that by December 30th or 31st, you are like done with PDG. You have spent every single penny of that and you are good to go. And that July 15th also date, I really want to highlight for you that is when I would like to have every single participant's budget approved, done. Spending can happen. If earlier, July 1st would be great. July 15th is just fine. And I don't even want to say July 30th because I don't want anybody to be later than July 15th. So that is that slide. And we are almost to the end. Thank you so much for your patience, everybody. I'm going to send out this list of documents and resources today, including, I'm going to upload the webinar. I cannot email it because it will be far too big for anybody to be able to receive. But you will receive the guidance document that will go through every single thing that you will ever need to know about birth to 3 seats, including eligibility. So I highly encourage you to go through that document in as much detail as possible prior to our eligibility webinar, so you can come really prepared with questions. And the planning document, which is a template that you must return to me via email by May 6th. Eligibility document examples, the birth to 3 seat specific family eligibility worksheet, which you can use as you need for the application process for families. Today's slides. Like I said, the webinar recording will be the only one not emailed out, but it will be available on the lead agency library, hopefully within the next 24 hours, but if not by the end of the week. And then lastly, your next steps, as I've mentioned a few times, as hopefully you've gotten the hint that this is when the due date is for this planning document, May 6th. That's the list of things that are going to be asked of you in that document. If you at all, anytime need one-on-one support, please schedule a meeting with me. and send an email with at least 2 meeting date and time options. I am going to prioritize you all in the next, window of time from now until our last webinar, really, and now through when you're submitting budgets, so that I can set you all up for success as much as possible. I highly encourage everybody to set up a time with me, if not, now after we've gone through all the webinars. If you haven't already accepted the April 6th eligibility webinar invitation, and make sure any staff have either gotten it forwarded to them, or you've sent me their email to include on any B-3 correspondence. And lastly, for the manyth reminder, complete your planning document and submit it to me by May 6th. And I've mentioned that document will receive feedback. I will send it back to you with feedback from me. Ideally within 2 weeks, that is going to be my goal timeline, but by the end of May for sure, so that you have that prepared for when your budget is, or when the funds, are ready to be budgeted in EGMS. So this is my last slide for the day. I'm just coming in a little short of the 2-hour mark, so I greatly, greatly appreciate everybody's patience, everybody's attention during the webinar today. There have been some really great questions that I'm going to circle back to the next time we meet. And then some of you have got your questions answered, but if anything at any point was not answered, either stay on the call, I will be with y'all for the next 15 minutes, or I'll keep the Zoom open for the next 15 minutes, or you can send me an email and I will answer that in writing for you. I see somebody popped a question in the chat. Oh, thank you, Angela. I appreciate that. So otherwise, I hope everybody has a wonderful day. I hope my friends in the New Orleans area stayed safe during the storm yesterday. And if anybody has family in New Orleans, I'm thinking of you, and you're hoping that everybody is safe. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday.
Devin,
Yes, sir.
did I hear you say I gotta go to the library to get all those documents?
Go to the library. No, I'm going to email them out to you guys, but they will
Oh,
also
okay.
be available there if you for whatever reason lose them. Go, for a second, Manny, I thought you meant going to the library to get eligibility documents, and I thought, oh man, Manny, I got to guide you back. How do we get there? But nope.
The only other thing is on your timelines.
Uh-huh.
Put the deadline for the budget July the 15th. My problem always been that beginning part. All those, I don't know what you call them. God Almighty, I just forgot the word.
Oh, that's okay. I wish I could think of it for you.
When you do the process, when you first get into EGMS, and you got to do.
Oh yeah, the contact
assurances.
information and assurances.
Yeah, that assurances, and that causes a lot of problems for me for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have been noticing every time that when it gets through your level to the next level, however, when it goes to the final level, it kind of slows down.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you, I'm going to be baking a lot of cookies for my friends in grants management to ensure that they pick birth to 3 seats to be the first thing that they monitor. So, or the first thing that they review.
Right.
So,
but one of the things that I have noticed in the remarks section, especially, if it's other than the beginning, near the beginning of the month, a lot of them says that the budget is approved effective the day that they approve it. So if we approve it, if they say that we submitted July the 15th, that is not going to be retroactive to July the 1st. So you might need to check on that and make sure that that
oh
is
yeah,
correct.
yeah. So when I say that I would like your budgets due or submitted, that I mean just you guys submitting your budget by or before July 15th, so that our process, because I know that our end does take some time.
Yeah, and I got mine already kind of ready.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it just matter of going through the process.
Right.
I have I feel like my numbers may not be like I'm going to put in the plan. for the slots. Because I
Okay.
noticed that during the last year when we went through this, it was pretty close, but it was never to exactly what we submitted in the plan
Yeah.
document.
Yeah, and I understand that, of course, I want it to be as close as possible so that you, like you asked earlier, you don't have to go and revisit every
Right,
couple of
right.
months or weeks. But I also acknowledge that
Yeah,
things
and I'm trying
change.
to, I'm
Yeah.
trying to give more slots to the new 2 centers,
Right. And what I will say too, Manny, about what you mentioned earlier, you're not the only one who has had a hard time with the contact information and assurances. And so that's one of the things that I'm going to address in the EGMS webinar in late May, before you guys even have access to EGMS on June 1st. I'm going to have screenshots. I'm going to have arrows. I'm going to have walkthroughs, and I'm going to make it as easy as possible to get those steps done, because they feel like such silly steps. It's you end up only clicking 2 buttons and getting it done, but then for some reason it holds so many people up.
right. And that's why I started doing my budget now. Based on what you said before, I was pretty close to your percentage.
Good.
The
Yeah,
22 and the 78, I was pretty
you
close. I
were.
was not exactly, because
You're
I
right.
went through last year and figured out my percentage. And so I'm already there. So all I got to do is pass my information to the EGMS system, and I should not have to wait through that process. To me at the end, that was all about those assurances. They really delayed me.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you the last question. Let me ask you this last question. You did say that we going to serve 12 months. What happens if they don't have their families ready? We can offer the 12 months, right? That's what we do, an offer in 12 months. But if the center, because remember the way that we do it here, we do just like we do the roundups. But however, the centers find their families, and then we verify the eligibility.
Right.
Okay, so that kind of slows down too, because we understand the work for them, but the biggest problem is getting all the documentation. That is the biggest thing that delays a lot of this. And when you say the 12 months, I say, oh my God, they may not get 12 months.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So, we've been able to say that 12 month of care for the last 2 years because we knew 100% that we had the funds for the, subsequent years. We knew 100% that we were going to not only, maintain, but expand. And, as we get to these higher numbers, we don't know necessarily how much more we'll be able to expand. There's a lot of question marks in that department. So what I would say, just to keep you and your centers and your Ready Start network safe, you can say 12 months of care, or the fiscal, like the 22-23 fiscal year.
I got you.
And then that way, once we get things finalized for the upcoming year, which we only just got, I feel like we just got this one figured out, have no time to take a breath for the other one, but that's okay. But we're going to figure that out soon for you guys. But if you are more comfortable saying from, July 2022 to June 2023, instead of saying 12 months of care, that's totally okay too.
Okay, I appreciate it. That's all I have.
Yeah.
I see there's still folks there.
I know there's people want to hear our conversation. Anybody else who's on the call want to pop off of mute and ask a question? Hopefully I didn't put anybody to sleep.
Hey, Devin, it's Amy. I know I asked a lot of questions today.
No, I love your questions. They're so helpful.
I'm transitioning from just doing the eligibility component to overseeing a couple of other portions of this grant. I just want to confirm everything. One of the questions that I had, can you just confirm what funding has to be completely spent by December? Is it what we currently have, or is what you're going to send us come July?
Yep, that's a great question. It is the PDG funding, which is part of what is coming in July, and it might be rollover funding you currently have. So The answer is yes and no and all.
Okay.
Anything that is connected, if you are, for your role, are you going to be connected to EGMS for Natchitoches?
I won't have an account because I'm not with the local district, but I'll be over with the person that does have the account, making sure.
Got it. So
correctly.
when you're looking at the budget in EGMS, you're gonna have on the left side, and I'll go over this in the eligibility webinar, like I said, or I'm sorry, the EGMS webinar, too many E words. But you'll have a drop down of either PDG or CCDBG or CURSA rollover. And that PDG will also include rollover if Natchitoches has any, which you all might not, since you were fully enrolled. So I would actually hope that you don't have any rollover. But I can't remember off the top of my head.
We do. Yeah, I'm looking at those numbers now. We do, only because we had some that started so late.
Gotcha. So any PDG rollover, any PDG regular, or any CURSA rollover, all of those three categories need to be spent by December 2022. The only thing that can be spent after December 2022 is the ARPA CCDBG. And that is the vast bulk of your funding for birth to 3 seats. That's 78% of what you have. So fingers crossed, it should be really easy to spend down that PDG funding. But where it might get tricky is when if you have a lot of rollover, then, spending down that money might be a little difficult. However, any network, you and any network can pay upfront additional funds. So if you have a significant amount of rollover to spend, and that could potentially cover several months of care for several children, you can, we at the department, I'll say, your business office might have an issue with it, but we at the department do not have a problem with you all drawing down funds for an upfront payment that says we are paying for care from October through January. I'll give an example so that it crosses over. October through January, paid on October 15th for this bulk of money that and the paper trail knows is including all those months of care that may potentially be after, but you've drawn it down and you've actually spent it to the centers before that December deadline. Does that make sense?
It does. And I guess the part that's what I was imagining in my head. By December 15th, I need to cut each child care center a check for the January through May payments of 2023. And that scared me because we have so many kids that transfer from one site to the other. So it does not sound like I have to do that. Nope. It's an option, but I don't, because I can use the ARPA funding from January to May of 2023. I just need to spend PDG carryover, and the CURSA funds all by December 15th. Okay.
You got it. You nailed it. Excellent. Check for understanding. You did it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Alrighty, folks. Anybody else? I see there's still 13 people in the webinar. Anybody else have any questions that you'd like to ask? Alrighty, I'm not seeing or hearing any, so I'm hoping that the folks who are still on are just being very, very polite and trying to last until 4 p.m. Otherwise, I'm going to say goodbye to all of you. Thank you so much for your time and attention today, and I hope you all have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, Devin.
Bye.